In this module, we're going to talk about variable types and data aggregation techniques. Okay, so why would you use data aggregation? Let's say you want to summarize information by a particular attribute. When I say attribute, we're talking about a variable, right? It could be, say, summarize this data by gender or by marital status, or in the sports world, it could be a lot of other metrics where you can define a player's history by one number, right? So it might not be very highly precise with respect to applying it to that person by itself, but I think it gives you a very good gauge as to how to compare different players. Okay, so some of these things we're going to we're going to employ here. Okay, so we'll start out with this. We'll use pandas. Okay, so we'll import pandas as PD, and of course import regular expressions. Okay, why regular expressions? Because a lot of the times when you deal with data, you will be dealing with this kind of issues where the data doesn't come in a very clean format. So for example, here we have pretty much everything in one column. Okay, so if you say how many columns are there, there is only one column which has jumbled up column names in this one box. Okay, so how do we know? It sort of appears to be that case, that you have this list and it starts off here and it ends here, but then you have this semicolon. Okay, but if you really look at it, when you say column 0 or df.column 0, you will see that it shows up as one column, whereas technically they see column 1, there is no column 1. Okay, so technically there should be all these different columns, but they all come in as ones. Okay, so what are we going to do? Of course, we started off with importing regular expressions. We are going to split these columns. Okay, so we're going to extract all the words, use regular expressions. So what does this do? We're going to take column 0 and we're going to split it like this. Okay, so now it comes in as a list of column names which we were able to extract using this regular expressions. So right away we see the usage of regular expressions. You will be using it more and more, okay, when you're dealing with real life data. Okay, so when you say column 0, it shows up as age, column 1 shows up as job, and so on, right? So this is what this piece of code is doing. And then we are defining an index, and then we are creating an empty data frame with this column names and this index. Okay, and you're going to see that here we are going to assign this empty data frame to a variable called df.new or df_new, and you see this empty data frame which is filled with nothing. Basically, it's NaN is basically null, not number. Okay, now we're going to go back to this data. Okay, we are going to go row by row. Okay, and extract each row and then split it. Okay, split all these things and assign it to these columns. Okay, how do we do that? So here there could be other ways to do that, but here I'm writing a for loop where I'm going down this data frame, going down this df data frame. Okay, I'm going down this data frame from 0 to the length of data frame, and for each row, okay, I'm assigning it to this row of this df new, and I'm splitting. If you look at this thing, it's basically separated by this semicolon. So I'm splitting it by semicolon and assigning it to each column. Okay, by splitting all that entries and assigning it to each column. And here we do that, and you will see that we get our clean data frame. Not as clean, but we're going to still do a little bit more post processing. But as you can see, this is a very simplified exercise of trying to run through this process of getting a data frame where you can actually work with. Okay, so now you have this data frame ready. Okay, and if you look at there's still a little bit of cleaning to do, because you see all these variables are basically, all these entries are basically defined by quote unquote, okay, and we want to clean them out. Okay, so for example, when you do look at the jobs column, you have all these different categories, okay, unemployed, services, management, blue collar, and so and so, but you don't want this, okay, you don't want this, okay, so, and plus you don't want ideally you probably don't want this dots also, right, because it just messes up the code a little bit. So you want to clean some of these things out, okay, and we are going to just do that. Okay, so let's look at what this piece of code does, okay, because we are going to assign it to job. So let's take this job thing, okay, and we are going to extract everything. So you see now it is pretty clean, right? So it's unemployed without this open and close quotes, right? So we're going to do that to wherever. So we did that to jobs. Now the jobs data frame, the jobs column looks clean. You see this? Now we have to do it for marital, education, default, and so and so. So we're going to do that here. Again, we are using regular expressions, and now we have this clean data frame. Okay, and again, I think even with that, okay, we see that df new.h, okay, df, okay. So you see this these things are not still coming in as numbers, okay, they are coming in as objects, okay. So we want to do that conversion as well, okay, and this is what we are doing. All the numbers we are converting to float, copying the new data frame to the original one, and now we have this clean data frame, okay. Now we can work with this, okay. So this sort of explains you that process, you know. You might have a different data set you will be dealing with where you will be doing something else, but this is generally what you want. You start off with what you want and you try to run through that process of how to get to that point, okay.